This episode is brought to you by Uncle Zippo Press. Uncle Zippo Press is your premier source for the world's finest comics, apparel, tunes, and media of all sorts. Uncle Zippo Press is the only place to find such exquisite literature as Fuck, the Book, and Mr. Benton, the world's only webcomic following the mundane daily exploits of Deicide frontman Glenn Benton, all available now at UncleZippo.com. Tell them we sent you, and you just may receive a special surprise. New episodes of Mr. Benton are available now. That's UncleZippo.com. UncleZippo.com.
You're listening to the Everything Went Black podcast.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Everything Went Black podcast. Welcome, author, screenplay writer, and filmmaker EricMiller, who is also a horror aficionado. It's a fun one, so definitely check it out, and also check out Eric's first novel, Whatever Happened to Uncle Ed, available at all of the usual places. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not listening to the other podcasts of the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse, you're definitely missing out. So do yourself a favor and check out every other Monday, Brandon Legion's Horror Wolf 666, Tuesday, Into the Necrosphere, brought to you by Jackie Smith. Wednesday, Everything Went Black, as well as Iblis Manifestations. Thursday, Necro Thursday, that is the Necromaniacs horror podcast, as well as day one of Soul Knox. Friday, Spitball Media comes at you. Saturday is a day off. But don't worry, because Sunday, Carl Hikara returns with day two of Soul Knox. Carl and I are full speed ahead with our Darkness Weaves collaboration, which is sadly coming to a close over the next few months because the end of the line is here with the work of Carl Edward Wagner, a author of weird fiction, horror, dark fantasy, and in some ways, some people might say, the grandfather of the grimdark fantasy genre. So check it out. We've got a few more episodes left. We finished all the Kane stories, and we're moving on to some of his pastiche Robert E. Howard tales. So check it out. If you want to support the podcast, in addition to listening and sharing with your friends, you can join the Everything Went Black Patreon. And for as little as $1 a month, you get access to bonus content. For $5 a month, you can check out all the bonus content, as well as get early access to the shows. And for $25 a month, a mere $25 a month, you can sponsor the podcast. You and I are both huge horror fans. As a matter of fact, I do another podcast called Necromaniacs, which is primarily we speak about horror films, old and new, and I have two other co-hosts. So. But this podcast is focused on interviews, so that's why we're hosting you here for this.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So just to get right into it, what was your entry point into horror? Was it like books first, or movies, or
I got to give credit eternally to the amazing Sammy Terry. late night horror movie host. I believe it was Channel 4, Indianapolis, growing up all over Indiana, Midwest, and late Saturday nights, Sammy Terry came on, and that was the heyday of the horror hosts, which have, it's dwindled now. I think Sven Gulli might be one of the few that are left. But Sammy Terry didn't make fun of the movies, didn't do a Mystery Science Theater 9000 on it. He and his pet spider George treated every movie, no matter how good or bad, with respect that it deserved. And as a young kid watching that right before Kung Fu Theater, which turned into another love of mine, late night TV, but that introduced me to Hammer Films and Vincent Price and all of these. And so it was basically, that was one of my first entrees that I remember. There were always books around. My dad always had books around, but I was as soon as I was going into comics, getting old enough to read, I would find things and find horror and some things that you'd have to hide from your parents that are probably pretty benign these days. But back then, like, what the heck are you reading there? What are you looking at? So I do got to give credit to the immortal, literally or figuratively, Sammy Terry. I believe he's still alive, quote unquote, and doing shows and doing events all across Indiana. So if you haven't heard of him, check him out. It's fun. And again, good intro to that, which led to lifelong passions like Vincent Price, huge hero of Vincent Price. Just the persona, the parts that he played, some of my favorite films, which I always like to riff on. A lot of people either don't remember or miss The Abominable Dr. Phibes.
Oh, yeah.
Still one of my favorite films, and just a weird out there, what the F is going on here in that strange 60s, 70s, but very gothic, very Poe, very revenge, and, big imprint on me. And then the guy's does a cookbook, and I always said this to other people. The Voice with Vincent Price. You hear the voice, and it's kind of that weird, indistinct accent. And I always just thought he grew up in England, like a lot of like Christopher Lee and all the other great. Now he's from Kansas City. He's a Midwest guy.
I was going to say he's Midwest.
Exactly, but he's obviously a theater guy and theater trained, but how few actors can create the persona that is so persistent and really took over an industry. I mean, you just say the name, and generations of people, you instantly think horror. And so anyway, that was my entree to it, and some of the great original films. And as I got older, sneaking out to see Last House on the Left when I probably too young to see that, and VHS exploded and theaters and everything. So I just, became steeped in the genre, and then started reading everyone from Stephen King to Matheson to so many other great people. And shouting out to Robert E. Howard, still one of my favorite writers.
Oh, yeah.
Most people think that, he wrote Conan, which is obviously the ne plus ultra of his oeuvre, but he wrote horror stories. And one of my absolute favorite horror stories and short stories is Pigeons from Hell. So he wrote Westerns, he wrote every genre, but people kind of look over that and go, oh, no. And you may know this, but it turns out, I didn't realize this till a few years ago, one of the few writers that Howard actually conversed with, because he literally lived in a super tiny town in Texas with
Cross Plains, Texas.
Cross Plains, Texas, no internet, no TV, no phone back then mostly. And he wrote letters to H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
So it's just like, again, we can go into Lovecraft if you want. He's obviously on the list of the writings, and there's controversy about him and his life and where he came from, but he was hugely influential on Robert E. Howard, who has been hugely influential on everyone. So I got into reading and movies, and they kind of moved lockstep with each other in my life.
Yeah, this podcast is we're fans of H.P. Lovecraft and just weird fiction in general. That's like a big focus on what we talk about over here. And and of course, there's like the controversy, well, whatever, blah blah blah. You have to take all that stuff. It's like over like 100 years ago at this point.
Yeah, it's 100 different era, different time, different things, and there may be things that I don't agree with politically in certain things or certain people's standpoints, but I can still read the stuff or listen to the stuff that they do, and we don't all have to agree with everything. We become so polarized in the world right now, and I agree. I'll speak out about things that are really bad and that I don't like and that are hurtful to people, but at the end of the day, I may live a life that some people don't like, but is it in my book? Is it trying to influence people? No. If it's a good story, it's a good story. Is there anything in the Mountains of Madness that is, racist or anything? Not that I read. So I can separate that between the two.
Yeah, Robert E. Howard. It was Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, and Lovecraft all were like pen pals back then.
Oh, yeah, oh, that's right. Clark Ashton
Yeah.
Smith, also, who again, I have huge gaps in some of my things, and I've missed people, and I'm a fan instead of a scholar, so I always apologize. Please don't attack me in the comments that you missed, forgot somebody, but Clark Ashton Smith was huge, and also William Hope Hodgson.
Yes.
There
Oh
were there
man.
were yeah, like we all forget people. There were a lot of people that were hugely successful, but I wasn't aware that he was also friends with Smith, but that makes sense. And again,
Yeah.
I'm behind on catching up on my Smith. I'm vaguely aware and read enough, but it's like wow, there were some real giants back there, and we tend to focus on Mary Shelley and the giants, and Howard, of course, is his own type of giant. But there's plenty of other people back there writing and doing weird things. The whole pulp era,
Yeah.
which is
Weird Tales.
oh man, weird,
Yeah.
from the original Weird Tales and all that, but just from the science fiction to the fantasy to the detective stories, even Howard's detective stories, and the boxing fiction was a huge genre. And it's kind of, I lament a little bit that section, the section of America that when everyone read and the pulps were everywhere, and every single person would pick up horror and fantasy and boxing and adventure, and it was a completely different world than we have now. I mean, we're all devouring it on YouTube and streaming now, but back then everybody read stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing about Howard. You touched on it earlier, was that he was a working writer, and like, yeah, we love his sword and sorcery and horror stories, but there's that sort of forgotten cachet of stories that he wrote, which, were like, boxing stories, like was it Turlo O'Brien, I think was his
Yeah,
character that he had. And yeah, because he had to make a living. He had to
he had to
go
make a
out
living.
there, yep, Cross Plains, Texas. He could work in the oil fields or he can be a writer. So he was banging out, you know, pay by the word pulp fiction, and it
Yeah,
was
and with no literary background. I believe I read at one point that he visited a library, or that I'm sure he visited more, but he died at such a young age. It's startling how much that he wrote. But at such a young age, I think he went to Dallas or somewhere with his dad and visited a library once or twice in his life. Like, how did this guy from the small town with like no reference whatsoever, and to come up, become one of the great literary people of all time? And I love that. I like that spark of, why does somebody want to be a musician? Why do you want to be a writer? Why do you want to be an actor? We may never know the answers to any of those things. It's usually groupies and piles of cash, but like, why did that guy and so many others pick up the pen and do that? And along those lines, a little bit off the topic, but on it, one of my favorite writers, mystery writer, I call it tough guy fiction, if you're familiar with John D. MacDonald. If you open, he did everything. The most famous is the Travis McGee series of books, which are among my favorite, and still shocked that they've not become a big TV series. They keep flirting with that. But he also wrote The Girl, the Gold Watch, and Everything. Cape Fear was one of his novels, and he was a guy in the Navy, upper middle class, and he got out of the Navy after World War II. And instead of going into the family business or getting an MBA, he's like, I want to write fiction. And from the biography that I read, everyone, his family, friends are like, excuse me? What?
yeah.
Where did this come from? And preternaturally talented. One of the cool things is picking up a John D. MacDonald book and you open the blurbs on the front. And almost one of the ones I have is almost every huge writer on the planet, from horror to mystery to science fiction to whatever, they're all like just in awe of John D. MacDonald.
John D.
And
McDonald. I'm gonna
John
write
D.
that down.
MacDonald, yeah, yeah. So and I picked him up later in life, and there's plenty of others though, and not just in horror, but all different genres. So yeah, when you discover a writer like that, and like that, they kind of like Howard did, they sucker you in with a cool story and you're the flash and the bang, and then suddenly you've learned something. McDonald does that very well. That you're reading along and it's tough guy, and is Travis going to get out of this? Is he going to get his ass kicked? Is he going to live? And then you're suddenly 3 pages into a treaty on life or love or the environment or the human condition, and you're like, wait, what just happened there? What did you do to me? And then you
I
get
feel
back
like
into the
I feel like Harry Crews kind of sucks you in the same way, like some of his writing, because it has a little bit of that tough guy element to it, but then he explores like such deeper topics than that.
Yeah, and that's that's the best writing, or the best anything, the best music. I mean, Iron Maiden does that so well to me. But even getting into music, Metallica, it starts. I mean, come on, they're master of puppets. We're talking about deep stuff here, and you can bang your head to it, and you can thrash, but it's about drug addiction and so many things that I like when people write a genre off. write a type of music, a song or whatever off when it's really about something deep and meaningful. And like back in the day, the whole satanic panic and all the congressional reviews, which Dee Snider just so aptly represented the whole world in such beautiful fashion. But people attacking Ozzy for a suicide solution, like these are it's not a suicide song. It's not. It's against it. It's speaking to people, and what they're ignoring is that these books and these songs and things that they may seem to the outsider to be a dark, weird thing. And believe me, I was looked at askance by so many people by the things that I'm reading and listening to, but it's really an artist speaking to people that are alienated and alone and scared and afraid in the world. And I hope I get to do that through my art a little bit sometimes. I want to entertain, but also reach out and say, hey, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be scared. It's okay. People want to commit suicide. Don't do it. Call for help, talk to your friend, get help. And then these things get demonized, which is, horrifying in its own right.
At what point did you, pick up the pen and start doing your own writing?
Really, really early. Like most people, I think you start, I don't know what the spark was where I said, hey, I want to be a writer, but might have been, Dr. Seuss, which is harder than it looks. But some of those early readings, I was probably fourth or fifth grade. And the one thing I always reference is, and I've just found a copy of it, is one of the little short story, which is like a page long in the fifth grade, sixth grade, that I wrote about a sentient executioner's block that's laughing as it slaps up the blood, and which, as I say in my bio, got me a trip to the principal's office. Horrible writing for a sixth grader. I should have been much better at that. But so, somewhere in there, I just started emulating the writers that I liked, and I always had stories in my head. I remember everybody's talked about this for decades now, but when we would travel a lot to see family and friends, and I'd be in the back of the car and watching the world go by, and I would just be imagining stories in my head. And the lament now is like, oh, everybody's got a video screen on the back of the seat, or they're listening to the iPod, or mom and dad always had the radio on somewhere, so I was alive during the switch from AM to FM, so I got to hear this amazing mixture of music that you kind of don't get these days unless you really search for it, if your algorithm really treats you well. But I just remember always dreaming up stories, and then I wanted to be an artist, so I'd kind of draw those, and I really didn't have any talent. And then I started writing them out. So that was kind of the genesis at a pretty early age.
When did you realize that you could actually, publish this stuff, and like what were early experiences with that? Because that's always been like the dream of anyone who like scribbles their ideas and their stories down. It's like the slim tome on your bookshelf,
No, exactly. You're right. I remember doing submissions. I still have them. I still have some of the original rejection letters. I think my dream was to be in Omni magazine. I used to get the subscription to that, read it. I'm big into science fiction in addition to horror and other genres too. And the great back then, Ellen Datlow, the amazing editor, legendary, and who now I've met many times at conventions, which is hilarious later on. And I'm sending my terrible stories in, dreaming of being in this big magazine. And of course, they were rejected. They were probably terrible. But so probably in high school, I had a great English teacher that encouraged me, like we all do. I didn't get a lot of encouragement, but this one particular teacher, Mr. Brantley Blythe, would basically, hey, you're pretty good at this, kid. And some friends parents would read all, the weird friend group, the comic book friend group, liked my writing and encouraged me. And so I started sending things out to magazines, like we all do. And like they say, a million rejections. If you're familiar, there's the saying in writing that you're not a real writer until you've been rejected 1,000 times. Now, I look at that as they also tell you that doing the same thing over and over and expecting the same result is madness. So where's the fine line? I think at a point, if you've been rejected 272 times, you might want to question whether your story or your writing's any good or not. But it's a nice way to say it. So millions of rejections, but like I tell everybody else, failure is not a bad thing. Get better. Some of my favorite writers, completely non-horror, but one of my favorite writers of all time, my comfort books, if you're familiar with James Herriot.
It rings a bell, but I'm not familiar.
Yeah, so what was a global icon? I think they're still making series. So James Herriot was a veterinarian in Scotland in the 20s and 30s and up into the 60s and 70s. He had read and wrote a lot in college, but basically spent his life being a rural Scottish veterinarian and a great storyteller. And in the 60s or 70s, whatever the time frame is, he started writing his stories and he tried to get them published. And there were other, I guess I'm recalling from his biography that there were other veterinarians had written stories about animals. So the publishers were like, yeah, this is kind of mid-level, whatever. And he sent his stories off, and his writing style wasn't very good, and he got rejections. And he eventually, there's an example, I can't remember if it's in his autobiography or the one that his son wrote about him. They actually show the example, and this is startling, and I tell every reader to hunt this up and look at it. Is his style telling the same story was one way, pretty good writing, but not great. And after 10, 20 rejections or whatever, he literally 100% reinvented his writing style to what we know now. And it's startling to see it on the page and see the difference. But to finish that story, he became semi-regionally famous in England, and for some reason it hit on, I believe it was Bantam Books, collected his books and put them out in paperbacks. He became, and still is, a worldwide global publishing sensation. Hundreds of millions of books, multiple books. The veterinarian practice that he is still a major tourist attraction in Yorkshire, England. I've still not been there. It's one of my destinations that I have to get to before I die. And to his last day, he would write at night on the TV table while everybody's eating dinner, and he's telling his little stories at the encouragement of his family. And they're an amalgamation. They're not true stories, but they are true. They're an amalgamation of events. The time and dates have shifted, but most of the stuff that's in there really happened to him in various ways, and the characters are real. And he's one of the most gifted natural storytellers. I'm astonished. Every chapter in his books, which lead to a greater overarching story, is a perfect short story in and of itself. And the stories are about the animals, but they're really metaphors for the people and the relationships with the land and farming and changing technology and the war. And again, far away from horror, believe me. He apparently suffered things in his life. He had depression and had shock therapy. Wasn't the rosy life that everybody sees. But I still go back to that, like a guy that changed his writing style and had a lot of luck, and people that championed him. That, I think at one point, an editor's assistant or an agent's assistant dug his stuff out of the pile and literally walked into the boss and said, "You have to effing read this." And became, again, hundreds of millions of books. And to his dying day, he still ran a veterinary practice. He's like, "I'm not a writer, I'm a veterinarian. I take care of animals." And it's such a great life story that inspires me. And I just wish that I had 10% of the storytelling ability that guy does. And again, we're talking about horror here, metal music and dark stuff, but that's one of my go-to places. Like when I need comfort, I go back to that.
What's interesting is the fact that he kept himself grounded with his actual career. And I think it's fair to say that was enabled him to put aside his ego and change, his style, because like to him, it was probably like, oh, this is a hobby that I'm doing. And I don't have to be, my identity is not synonymous with my writing style, playing music and whatever, you create this identity almost, and you can't get out of that box when that's like your main focus. So with him, he had his veterinary practice, and he's like, "Oh, this writing stuff I do it for fun," and
do it for fun. And I think the lesson in that, which I tell people too, and it's hard sometimes. Like we want to be read, we want to be listened to, we want fans. Yes, it's nice to get the adulation, but reality, artists, we want to connect with people and hopefully influence lives. But at the end of the day, you're the most important person. You have to love what you wrote, the song you played, your performance. You got to love it. If everybody else does, that's great. That's the gravy on the top, but you got to please yourself first. So, but yeah, that humbleness of him, I've always tried to do that, and I admire people. I think there was, not to go too far on him, but one point when at the height of his fame, he did the tour of America and the book signing tours. And from what I read, he and his wife were just bemused by all the attention and just like, what is all this? Because he literally, I'm not the publishing sensation. I'm a veterinarian. And people kept saying, "Why don't you leave England and the high tax structure, and you're worth, you could save hundreds of millions." He's like, I've got enough, and I've got the practice. Why? I don't mind paying taxes. And why would I leave my home? Why would I go live in Malibu? I'm a country vet from Scotland. There's so many great stories in the books, and I'm on the 5th season of the PBS. Is the new, there was a 25-year BBC TV series on it, and then there's a newer one which encapsulates. It's just wonderful viewing. And again, you know what it is? Here's what it is. It's metal. It's punk. Those definitions that come out there, and we all hang that on it, that it's, we're all headbanging and reading and writing dark things. No, that guy was completely metal because he stuck true to his roots. So how does a country Scot vet that writes about animals and quirky people, that to me, that's completely metal. He did what he wanted to do. That's punk. That's hardcore. I'm not going to be changed. I'm going to do my art the way I'm going to do it. But he was smart enough to change it enough to be palatable. So.
Well, what's interesting too is, and I think this is even common with even horror and science fiction genres, where the stories were about the narrative was driven forward by, say, the veterinary stories with the animals. However, like what was weaved in there was his own personal life and then other topics. So even some of the best horror fiction in films, it's the same deal. It's like there's zombies, but we're really talking about like consumerism. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Romero did that so excellently well that I like to say I like things that are about something. And Romero did that. Walking Dead, the Walking Dead aren't the zombies, it's the people. Like, come on, guys, it's a metaphor. But the king of that is the appropriately titled to me, Stephen King,
Yeah.
because I think why he will still be being read 500, 1,000 years from now, and why he's one of the best selling art writers of all time is because you can strip all of the supernatural stuff out of his books and stories. And it's been done a few times, and it's still amazing stories about people, about small town, about blue collar, and he manages to create the variedness of all the hundreds of different people that are different each time. Then when you add the cool stuff in, that's the gravy. That's awesome that he can take that, and it becomes more terrifying because you identified with them, either as the hero as yourself or the neighbor or whatever. And that ability to, I mean, another humble guy as far as I know. So just like that, just like the talent there and the dedication and a little bit of luck, that things happened, and thank goodness for it. We got some of the best stories ever. I most of my life lived and read and consumed one of the greatest artists of all time. So that's kind of damn cool.
The sheer volume of his work too, because
Oh,
this, I mean,
Jesus.
I consider myself someone who's a fan, and I've read, you look at my bookshelf, but I feel like I've only scratched the surface of
I can't keep up.
the entire volume of this guy's work. You know what I
He
mean?
writes faster than I can read. Like, oh
Yeah.
my God. So
And have you read the Revival, that book he did a few years ago?
I haven't. No, that's on my list. I'm still stuck halfway through 1973 or whatever, whatever. I can't remember the 1963, whatever the book
Yeah.
is. I get so busy and go on tangents. And one of my tangents was this last year, thanks to a friend, I discovered Joe Abercrombie, and
Oh yeah.
I just went on a 10, 12 book diversion of like just devouring it. So like, sorry, everyone else on my reading shelf, including friends of mine, there's a new Abercrombie book out, and I'm just loving it, and now I'm
Oh man.
rereading them. But
That's a whole other tangent. The grim dark,
oh
brutal
yeah,
fantasy stuff. I love all that stuff too.
yeah, and which I don't read a lot in, and was only tangentially aware of. But if the only person ever, it's kind of like if the only heavy metal people I ever listen to is Iron Maiden, that's all right. I know there's other great people out there, but man, he just drop kicks it out of orbit. Like, wow, this guy. But I do want to get more into that genre when I have time, and get back to King and catch up Revival
Yeah.
and others.
The grimdark stuff, I kind of backed into that because it was like, sword and sorcery short stories, really very horror oriented, like the Robert E. Howard stuff. And I don't know if you're familiar with Carl Edward Wagner,
Mm, mm.
but he's
Yeah,
another incredible writer.
I was cruising your Instagram, and I think I liked a few of them. The Darkness Weaves, which
Yeah.
I still have all the Carl Edward Wagner books
Oh
are
yeah.
on my shelf, and still the paperbacks that I bought when I was a kid. And yeah, you buy them for the Frazetta cover
Yep.
initially, but then you get into the richness of that character and the darkness of it. So
Yeah.
and now that you mention it, yeah, that's grim dark. That's OG grim dark.
Exactly. And that's the guy that I do those Darkness Weaves episodes with, my friend Carl. He's way more versed in the grim dark stuff. So he made a lot of recommendations to me, which I followed through on. And it's like, it's if you're into horror and you also like the kind of longer, like epic fantasy like works, like, they're all like 400 or 500 page long novels, as opposed to like a 20 page or 15 page short story. It kind of melds both of those styles like really well, I think. So it's a new thing
Yeah,
for me
and
too.
I'm wondering it's been years since I read him, but is Elric of Melnibone, that's technically grim dark, I guess it would be. I mean, to me, it
Sure.
was all just sword. It got mixed up in the whole fantasy and sword and sorcery. But when you start getting into the subcategories, it's like music. Like, okay, is Metallica thrash, or are they metal, or what? I love people that can like the subcategories, between death and dark and this and everything, and that's awesome. But at the end of the day, do I like something? I don't care what you call it. To me,
Yeah, I'm on the same page with that.
yeah,
Yeah, the Elric stuff is also one of the, for me as when I was a young kid, Conan, Lovecraft, like Elric entered in as like the first true like anti-hero, because Conan rough around the edges, but he was a good guy. You know what I mean? But Elric, Not exactly sure how I feel about him, you know?
Yeah, he's yeah. This brings up one of my favorite book series and one of my favorite writers, and he hasn't quite gotten the accolades that he should because Roger Zelazny's who I'm talking about, if you're familiar with.
Yeah.
Only, as far as I know, only one of his books, Damnation Alley, was made into a movie. Where his contemporaries and similar, like Bray Bradbury and others in that ilk, all had movies and TV made, so they're in the common vernacular. But Zelazny hasn't quite penetrated, but talk about an anti-hero, and I think probably my top, I collect them as one book. So the first 5 Chronicles of Amber books, I mean, they're mixed genre, they're mostly fantasy, but now I'm thinking about it, you really do back into grimdark, because, and I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, and it would take too much for me to pitch them, and I always pitch it terribly, but this main character of the many, it's amazingly wonderful imagination that just blows me away. I've literally read the first 5 books probably 20 times or more. A core one of Amber, and it's basically there's one city, Amber, at the center of all reality, and the princes and royalty of Amber can walk the road and change things and walk throughout and create all of reality. And as the story starts, he's been locked up in an asylum, being kept prisoner, has no memory of who and where he is and what he's been, has no idea, spoiler alert, that he's a member of this royal family of all creation. And he wakes up, and when he starts figuring out what things are going on, he wants to get he realizes his hated brother has occupied the throne since their king father is missing. And he's like, no, the throne is me. I'm the oldest. So he goes on this arrogant prince thing to get allies and assault the kingdom. There's so much more going on than that, again, it would take me an entire episode or life to say it. So it's easier to just read the books. But
Yeah.
what I love about it is that what you said, that character, he's an arrogant, one of the most powerful. He's a sorcerer. He's got the magic sword. He's a badass. He can walk between dimensions, superhuman, heals fast, all these things, manipulate space and time and certain amount of magic. And through the books, learns and grows and becomes humble and finds out that the things that he hates are not, and the people that he hates are not necessarily who and what he hated, and that he's the monster. I've done monstrous things. I love that, just the question, what have I done out of arrogance to retain my throne, to do what I thought was right that turned out to maybe not be right? And it's a really amazing character study of him and also the other people in it. So I cannot recommend Chronicles of Amber enough. And I cross my fingers. I believe, maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but there was maybe going to be a mini series done of it years ago, but you couldn't do it in a mini series. Each of the 5 books could have its own series. So, hey, Netflix, Amazon, whoever, if you're listening, the rights are probably out there somewhere. It's just like, that would be one of the most epic things ever, because the source material is so good and it goes in so many different directions, but it's really about this guy. So hopefully you get a chance to look at it.
Yeah, that's kind of like, the era I'm in right now, the sort of flavor I'm experiencing is like these kind of like world building, immersive epics, and like right now I'm reading Book of the New Sun, which is a Gene Wolfe sort of thing. It's like, once again, it's in that kind of grim dark world, and but it's about the characters obviously, but it really is more about the whole world too, and that this sounds like it fits right into that really nicely.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, again, my hat's off, and I'm in awe of writers who can do that. That
Yeah.
either, whether it's science fiction or horror or grimdark fantasy, whatever, that create the entire world and then populate it with real living, breathing people. And people like Abercrombie, like I early on, before I started reading it, I read some criticisms. Well, this starts kind of slow, and I didn't think it started slow at all. The first book, The Blade itself, and then you start realizing each one of these books has 50 or 60 main characters, 3 or 4, or 50 or 60 characters, 3 or 4 main characters, sub characters, and he's built this entire world. And yes, he's pulling from Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. It's adjacent to things that we know, so it's
Yeah.
like but he still built his own unique world with politics and people and kingdoms and all this stuff, and you're not bored by it. You're not sitting there getting hammered by the political structure of whatever. You learn it through these cool characters and the adventures and the things that happen. And again, I'm in awe of that. Anyone who does that, same thing. Zelazny, holy mackerel. Another, I think I had read that this became a TV series, and for all I know, it's already out and I missed it. But one of my favorite books of all time is called Road Marks by Zelazny. And I read in an interview that he said he liked to underwrite things. And Road Marks is probably, I don't know, 250 pages. It's a quick little paperback. he creates amazing characters and a road that goes throughout space and time that, again, like kind of like the Amber books, that the people who are attuned to the road can get onto an on-ramp, and you can go back to ancient Greece, or you can go forward to whatever space and time. And it's following a character trying to recreate events that happened in his life to change something that went wrong. And that could have been a 2,000-page book. Holy mackerel, could have easily been. And just in that one book alone is enough imagination and fodder and storylines for 20 seasons of a TV show. And so you don't have to have hundreds and hundreds of pages. And again, Zelazny said he purposely underwrote to engage the reader's mind. And maybe that's why he's one of my favorites, that it gets you thinking. He gives you just enough to get you involved and let your imagination run rampant, but not enough to bore you.
You know, it's interesting you brought that up, because one of my favorite newish horror writers, Adam Neville, I noticed like in his last few novels have been under 300 pages long, and the novels prior to that, like The Reddening and The Ritual, were like 500 to 600 pages long. And I'm wondering if he was taking a page from Zelazny's book, or maybe an editor got involved or something like that.
Or something. You just remind me of a story that I read. Another favorite writer, not horror, of James Ellroy. If you're familiar with Ellroy,
totally.
And a lot of people, L.A. Confidential is the most known, but I've been reading him from the very beginning. And to be honest, his book, The Black Dahlia, which is a period detective movie wrapped around the Black Dahlia killing, that's a horror novel.
Absolutely,
Ellroy wrote one of the most effective horror novels ever, and that's one of my favorite books. But there's a certain point where he was the biggest literary mad dog on the planet. And if you know the history, he's like, nobody tells James Ellroy what to do. He's a madman. And so he was writing like, I don't know, 1,000. His books just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And most of the words were good. And at a certain point, I forget what the last of the big books were, the publisher just said, dude, you got to cut this down. We're not going to publish a 1,000-page novel. You got to cut it down. And it became a loggerhead. And he's like, no, fuck you. I'm James Ellroy. This is the book. I'm not going to do it. And this is a lesson for writers. He was big TV and movies, and he, you don't get bigger sales than him. And they just said, no, we're not doing it. So the story that I read, and the reviews tie into this, that he was pissed off and went back and refused to cut story and characters. And this is a great writer's lesson. So he said he went back and he started cutting words. He just started editing words. So, and hopefully I have this right. It's The Cold 6,000 is the book that came out, and the reviews were literally, so he got it down to like 600, 700 pages, whatever it was. And the reviews come out. Writer at the height of his powers completely reinvents his writing style. Electric, crackling, lightning prose, just like this badass whip, crackety machine gun style writing. And was all because, if I remember it right, that they said, no, we're not going to publish 1,000 pages. So he changed his style, and it became a new writing style for him. And that's, again, like the Harriet, changing your style in midstream and then becoming a new way of telling art, kind of like Pat Boone, going from Pat Boone to doing a metal album, Hey,
that's interesting about Ellroy in that book, because I remember reading that and I was like, it's almost like, because like Hemingway is like real laconic and very terse with his style, and like very short sentences, and like I'm like, this is like the maximized version of that. And I was like, you almost feel like this guy's like drinking gallons of coffee and snorting cocaine and crystal meth and everything, and staying up all night writing these things. And he's just like, like he's sweating, and I'm like, yeah.
It's like, you remind me of another one of my favorite books. Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, science fiction. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it. Yeah.
And I'm behind on catching up on his reading too. And I have to say, to my opinion, one of the greatest living writers, and just iconic in the things he does with words. But writing Snow Crash, which was a seminal science fiction cyberpunk. I still remember, and I have my original paperback copy, the Publisher's Weekly quote that says, Neil Stephenson has not leapt, he has vaulted onto the literary scene with this novel. Now, he had written under another name and had other books out before, but this is rapid fire, cool prose. And I don't know if he does this with all his books, but from what I read is he basically locks himself in the basement and goes to his writing room. And if the metal is jamming, if you can hear their house shaking, Neil is writing, leave him alone. name. And so I always said if they, that's kind of like the equivalent of Dennis Leary at his height on cocaine screaming a novel at you. But it's
Yeah.
accessible and fun and great. And it's still one of my most iconic, great novels. And there's just so much invention and craziness in it. But put that on your list. And I wasn't aware till later. I got it, read it, thought it was, still think I can't pick it up and look at it without reading the whole damn thing again. It just goes right to my DNA.
Oh, that's awesome.
And his later books are different style, and he gets much more literary, but they're still amazing. But I didn't realize that it's controversial. Not everyone liked it. Like the reviews are 50-50 on it. And like 2 years ago, I'm finally backwards reading the views of a book that I read 30-ish years ago, and like, wait a minute, people, how can you not like this book? What's wrong with you?
So your first novel, Whatever Happened to Uncle Ed, is that, do you draw from your personal experiences on this one as well?
Absolutely did. Like I think all writers do. The characters, the places. There's a warehouse scene in it, and I worked in a warehouse that soon. And I got all the ideas, bits and pieces of. I don't have an evil uncle out there that's doing black magic, and I can't dunk a basketball. But there's pieces of me in Max the hero. There's pieces of friends that I know and figures that I've known, and all the characters and the settings. And it takes place. I don't specifically say that's in Indiana, but there's enough clues and this admission that it takes place in small towns in Indiana. But it's really this generic small town and a generic weird guy at work that used to be a high school basketball star, and now he's just a mid-level accountant that acts kind of weird. And like, what's going on at your big weird mansion on the corner of town? And turns out with the complicated plot, he's basically fighting every month against black magic and demons to end a curse brought on that he inherited when he inherited the house. And it's driving him to the breaking point. His friends and the ones who know that come out of this world that are helping him, they're at the breaking point. But he's literally obsessed to put his life on the line every month. And I'm not putting my life on the line, but it's a very Midwestern work ethic that I tried to channel in there. Two things. The work ethic of your job is your life. You go to the factory, you go to the farm, the fields, whatever job you have, your job becomes your identity. The movie industry that I've worked in forever, we do hours that they're embarrassing, the number of hours. And we're either doing it for a paycheck or benefits or the art form. But people get obsessed and worked up in their job. And I tried to echo that in the character, that his job is ending this curse. And along the same lines, I go into the sports obsession, which they're closely related. Any type of obsession that sports people, race car drivers, I'm huge into racing, but basketball, football, whatever, that you'll literally put your body, your life, your health, everything on the line to win a trophy, to win a game. Forget the trophy, forget getting in the NBA, that like the high school level basketball, people go nuts to win a basketball game. And the identity that the players get from it and can't let go of, and that the fans, it becomes this all encompassing and in some ways a sickness, what people do. And that's what I try and capture and show. I think I pulled it off in there. And there's a point where he's falling apart and cracking apart, and the ends justify the means, and he's fighting these battles to do the good things. But even his friends have to say, dude, you need to take a month off. You're cracking, you're falling under the strain. And that's not just a guy playing basketball and fighting demons. That's every one of us in work. And, we all let ourselves push too far. How many bands has that broken up? How many writers went too far or tried to write too much, deadlines to meet? And, we don't all have the option of just saying no, because we all have rent to pay for the most part. But sometimes it's great to take a step back and take a breather and say, it's okay to miss a gig. It's okay to not write today. It's okay to call in sick and take a mental health day. Or if I lose the game, there'll be another game, and twist that around. So there's a lot of the themes that I try to adjust. And yes, those are brought from people that I know, myself, basketball people that I've known, players and heroes of mine that I've followed, and musicians also that will just, do whatever it takes to deliver music for whatever reason, and then end up just literally wrecking their lives and family and everything about it. But so again, pulling from, like you said, answering your question, pulling from a lot of places that I've been, people that I've known, and the weird obsessions in myself and others, but mostly fictionalized.
Yeah, that's a relatable story. I think that a lot of people can connect with, definitely. Yeah. So you also, what I find interesting about some of the things that you've done is the editing of the anthologies. Now, that's something I've always wondered, like how do you get into doing that, really?
Well, I That's a very good question.
Yeah,
I always I love the anthology format. I've always read them. I love
me too.
anthology TV and movies. And when I'd always wanted to publish books, and I was mostly writing short stories at the time, and this novel was still in the novella and stage. And so I thought, you know what? I'm just going to put out an anthology. The technology caught up where I could actually publish something. And essentially, the editor, if people don't know, an anthology is a collection of stories from other writers. Sometimes the editor has their own story or two in it, but a collection is where a writer will put a bunch of short stories or other things together. So anthology is a bunch of other people. But in general, the editor has the idea. In my case, the first book was, you always say, write what you know. Well, at that point, at 20 years, I've been doing horror movies in Hollywood. So it's Hell Comes to Hollywood. And I'm like, I want to have short stories based in Hollywood, written by Hollywood horror people of whatever position, between writers, actors, stunt people, assistant directors, whatever. And so I went out to a lot of friends that I knew, a lot of writer friends that I knew, and then also just people in Hollywood, some screenwriters, some non-screenwriters. One guy I met at Comic-Con out of the blue who turned out to be a good friend and one of the greatest writers I've ever read. And so I like the eclectic mix of in there, but then the editor has to get the stories in, and you have to tune them, make sure, most of the writers are pro level, but some of the beginners hadn't written a whole lot before. So you help them along with if there's a little missing story point. And believe me, that's humbling, because I'm editing people who are better writers than I'll ever be, and in my dreams I could never be that good. And then other people need a little bit more hand holding, and you go, oh well, here's how you would do this, or I can help you do that. So, and luckily everyone's professional and cool about it. And ultimately it's all a bunch of different stories on the same theme, and it's been pretty successful and people like it. And the other thing too in that collection, I do in all my anthologies, I like to mix super dark stories with lighter stories. Some are outright funny, and you kind of get the flow of the length. There's an actiony one and a ghostly one, and then a vampire one and a comedic one. So trying to give the reader a wide variety of a great fun experience.
I love anthologies. Like a couple, like a year last year, I was doing a lot of flying, so I always bring my Kindle with me, and there would be these things on Kindle that there's like 40 Lovecraftian horrors or something, and they'll have like a couple of anchors in there of like, okay, there's a Lovecraft story. But I discovered Daryl Schweitzer through that, and I was like, man, that guy, like, I've been on this tear with Daryl Schweitzer's work over the last like year or so, and it's like all short stories. And
Who I'm not aware of. So
oh man,
just made a
yeah,
note.
he's got straight up like horror stories, and then he also has like sword and sorcery short stories.
Oh, wow.
And
Well,
within those Lovecraft, those Cthulhu mythos, like 40 packs, there'd be like 40 stories in there. There was a sword and sorcery story and like a Lovecraftian horror, and I was like, wow, this guy, I got to find more of this stuff. And that's how I love finding out about new authors, by reading these anthologies. So yeah.
no,
So
and
you
that's
got these others too, the 18 Wheels of Horror and 18 Wheels of Science Fiction too.
Yeah, I do. In Hollywood, among the many jobs I've done in Hollywood, I'm in transportation. We're kind of the hidden department, even though we're
Yeah.
usually the biggest. And so I'm around. I live and breathe. I've got a commercial license. I'm not an over-the-road driver, but I do the transportation. I'm either in charge of the department or working driving. So I know that whole trucking world well. And of course, we all grew up on Smokey and the Bandit and all the great trucking movies. That American mythos of and Duel, one of the greatest movies
Yeah.
ever
Oh
made,
yeah.
which is pure horror from the other standpoint. So again, write what you know. I did 18 Wheels of Horror, which is trucking horror stories set in the trucking world, and they're not all behind the wheel of a truck. There's a waitress story in there, and there's a variety of different stories. Same thing with 18 Wheels of Science Fiction. There's some are in a spaceship, some are in a futuristic truck, some are robots, and a lot not. It's not overloaded with AI and self-driving. But 18 Wheels of Horror, my best-selling book, very well received. At one point, I actually went retail with it, and it was in 300 truck stops across the country, which was like a thrill, getting pictures of, hey, your book's on the rack, like I did something. But I gotta meet through friends Ray Garton, who has passed on. I grew up reading him, one of my favorite writers of all time. Super nice guy, super talented, and Ray wrote a story for me, and I'm like, wow, like this is a kid's dream come true. Like, not only do I get to hang out and talk on the phone with one of my idols, and he wrote one of the most iconic trucking horror stories ever, Lot Lizards, among so many other things, and Live Girls, which is vampires in New York in Times Square back in the day. He's written so many great books. So if you don't know him, check out Ray Garton. And what I like to say about Ray's work is that he was very, to my knowledge, unapologetically in the B space, but elevated to me. He would take these B setups like lot lizards. It's prostitutes at truck stops, but and yes, those elements are there, but he makes it a little bit something more. And he talks about the condition of people. And again, love the story that he wrote for me, and got to meet so many other people that came in and all the books, and just phenomenal experience. And again, hey, truck driving is a long, lonely thing, and if I can give a little bit of entertainment as the thing goes along, whether book on tape or reading it when you're doing your layover, your 32-hour restart. Entertain people that I know that are out there that are, it's a lonely life. Holy crap, it's a lonely life. And a lot of people quit, huge turnover, but a lot, 2 or 3 million long haul truckers still to this day. And you never see home, you never see family, you don't get paid that well. You're eating garbage food, and you listen to the radio and whatever a lot. It's a very, very lonely, isolating life. So in some small way, I hope these stories get out there and entertain people, and like, hey, that's me, or that's fun or different. And you don't have to just be into trucks or Hollywood to read any of these stories or books. I try to also make it accessible. I don't want to get people ground down in talking about an 18-speed Fuller transmission. That's not what it's about. It's not a, whatever. It's not a truck driving manual. These are stories. So I do take liberties with some of the trucking elements and some of the Hollywood horror elements too.
Yeah, I've been on the road quite a bit over the years. So, truck stops, the world of truck stops and long drives are like, that's the part of like rock and roll that like, people forget. They don't really understand that you're at a gig for like, a few hours, but the rest of the day you're traveling on a highway. So
Yeah, and you just finished a gig and you got to be in Cleveland, and you're in
yeah,
Denver.
you're
A friend of mine's,
yeah.
a friend of mine's driving trucks, and he would text me. He's like, "I'm leaving Chicago now, and I got to be in Denver in the morning." And I'm like, "Wow!" And again, over the whole road truckers do that, but it's the whole rock and roll world and the traveling thing. That's a whole different life too. The schedules are grueling, and so many artists have talked about it and everything. And again, people like the movie industry with our hours, and people, rock and roll, and that whole traveling circus. People out there who are not in it, you don't quite understand what the people do and go through, both the performers and the crew and the drivers, to bring you those little bits of entertainment. It's a tough life. I mean, Bob Seger summed it up pretty damn well. And I think Bon Jovi did also, and probably many, many others, but until you've done it. And I think at one point I did there's, the old rock star moment, the hello Cleveland, when you're in Chicago. I was working one year, I was on so many different shows that I literally forgot what city I was in. And I was giving directions. I think I was in Atlanta and thought I was in Cincinnati, or vice versa. And I'm giving directions, and people are looking at me like, we don't have that street here. And I'm like, wait, where am I? Like,
Yeah. Well, the worst is when you're in Europe and you don't know what country you're in. And,
no, yeah. And they're so tiny. Like,
yeah, you're in Luxembourg or Switzerland or, Slovenia, and you think you're still in Northern Italy.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that one, I think that's out of all these, I think I'm going to try to hit that 18 Wheels of Horror first. I mean, that's like, that sounds really, really awesome, actually.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I hope you like it, and I'm okay if people don't like things too. Not every story is going to hit. That's the other beauty of anthologies, is that you may not like this story, but you may love the next one, and that's kind of the beauty. And I think people are forgiving of that. Whereas a novel, if you hate a novel, you just hate the whole damn thing, and you wasted how many days of your life. But an anthology, whatever, that story wasn't for me. Get on to the next one and love it. And the beauty of it too, people listening, is it, like you said, you get to meet new writers that you might like. And
Yeah.
I always like to say this, whether it's music, it's art, it's books, please, if you like something, give it a review, give it a shout on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever you shout out things for music or whatever. It doesn't matter if it's AC/DC making 50 million a tour, 100 million a tour, or if it's some little band you've never heard of. The reviews, not only do they help the ego, but they help the algorithms of people to introduce, to sell, but also introduce the music to new people, the book to new people, and all that. At the end of the day, to just log on and see that somebody liked what you wrote or what you edited or what song you put out, it means something. Because like the truckers, creative people are lonely people, and we're putting our souls out there for other people to dissect. And it's brave. You got to be brave to get up there, to take up a microphone, to do spoken word, to sing a song, to play in a band, to put a record, or put a record out, or to put a book out on Amazon. You're getting ready to get slaughtered. And if you don't like something, just don't say anything. Have a nice day. We never met, but if you like something, please just say something. Be nice. Pass it on, because you're like my friend Brett has turned me on to Game of Thrones, and then he turned me on to Joe Abercrombie. I got to thank Brett Pierce forever. Like I should have discovered these things on my own, and I try to do that for other people too. Like, no, this is a really good thing. I like to promote my own stuff too, but like I said earlier, I like to promote everybody else. And some of these works, songs, books, whatever, might change somebody's life in a subtle way, and or just have fun, and that's awesome. So spread the word.
Yeah, I love Game of Thrones. I got into it late though, I have to be honest. When I was it came out, I was still living in New York when it came out, and I just remember I heard about it, and one day, I was in Times Square, and there was like some big like promo thing going on, and I'm like, Game of Thrones. It's like that thing's made that's a throne made out of swords. I'm like, how come I don't know
Like
about
what?
this? You know what I mean? And that's what got me into it.
And I've never met George Martin ever, but I'm a huge fan. And this, along these lines of all success in the world, if he never finds the time to finish the books, you know what? He's earned it. The story has been finished by the show. Great. I hope that he finishes them, because I'm a gigantic fan of his writing. But he was a known quantity. People knew him, but he wasn't the global superstar before that. He wrote one of my favorite, speaking of anthologies, Wild Cards. I don't know if you're familiar with George
No, no.
Martin's. So back, forgetting when they first came out, but he imagined this world of where kind of, I don't want to say superheroes esque, but kind of superhero adjacent, and he brought in other writers to write in this series of books
Oh,
called the
that's
Wild
cool.
Card series. And the first one, I think George wrote the first one, called Jet Boy, which is one of my favorite short stories of all time. That kind of vaguely alternative U.S. World, post World War II. So there's a little bit of steampunk. There's all kinds of elements in there, but he created those books. He knew everybody. He was obviously making a living as a writer and doing things, but he was not the global sensation. And it's great to see that the promise of somebody that was doing stuff and had a name, but then turned into a phenomenal, giant, world spanning. And so hats off to all success. I hope that could happen to everybody, and I'm just so happy. And hopefully it boomerangs back, that people can find the Wild Cards books and read some of the early stuff from him and various other writers that are just terrific stories. And again, that might be a TV show right now, and I just missed it because there's so many damn TV shows being made that you can't keep track of them. But just some phenomenal stuff, and that influenced so many people going on. So that's his biggest legacy. People like me and others.
I'm definitely gonna seek that out. We have the whole Game of Thrones, all the books that are available. We have right now in our library up here. So with the film work and the screenwriting and all that sort of stuff, was that something that was a goal of yours, or did you just sort of get into that as like another way of making a living, or
Well, when I first came to Hollywood, I wanted I wanted to be an editor. I wanted to be a director of photography. It turns out I can't really edit film, and I don't know how to compose a shot to save my life. So those dreams went away quick. But I had always been a writer, but I didn't come to Hollywood thinking that I was going to be a screenwriter. But I was lucky enough. My internship that I got years ago at Orion Pictures was in development, which, if you don't know, it's there used to be a lot bigger development world, where they would throw money at writers and directors and actors who would develop stories and find writers and find things that would, the studios would make the investment in them, and then those turn into projects with those stars and people attached. So I was at Orion Pictures on a floor with an amazing bunch of people. My internship was with Howie Deutsch, who directed Pretty in Pink, among other great things, who's still working. I think he's actually directing something right now. He's done so many great films over the years. But the desk next was Dennis Quaid and Kathleen Summers, his producing partner. And just up and down the floor were all of these people and actors and directors and writers that all had deals to develop stories. So I really quickly, and part of the job was pre-reading screenplays. Like, you get, the agencies send over, they want the director to direct something. So, oh, here's the stack of screenplays. So between the interns and the desk assistants and the producer, the associate producer, who was the kind of the head of our office, you have to get through this volume of scripts. and see what's good, well, first off, what might be right for the person you're working for,
Right.
but also what's really good and all that. And of course, at the same time, all of these scripts are going to other people. So I early on, as a writer, without thinking I was going to be a screenwriter, I'm suddenly reading Kid in a Candy Store. I'm getting all of the top hot scripts that are coming across the desk. I'm reading, 10 scripts a day. You take stacks, you still do this, you take stacks home to read on the weekends. And the screenplay format just started getting bumped into my head. It's a 3-act structure. It can be limiting, it can be liberating, and there are films that take liberties with it, like the Rashomon effect that Weapons did so very well. But in general, it's a 3-act structure that we all know, whether you know it or not. And so just reading all of these, I started going, hey, I can do this. I can kind of do this. So I started adapting my prose writing style and learning the structure. And my first couple of scripts weren't that good. And I met a friend who was also in some of the same books and things. And a couple of friends through the years, we started writing together and learning how to write a screenplay. So that's kind of where it went. And 6-7 years later, I made my first sale with a different writing partner, which was great. A little movie called The Shadow Men was my first movie, and learned a lot about rewrites, which is critical, one of the critical skills. But also at that point, got an agent, later on a manager, and you start getting sent around for reads and takes. And sometimes they'll hire you, sometimes they'll buy your spec, whatever. There's a whole dance in Hollywood of looking for projects, meeting writers that they may or may not get along with, who can take notes well. And at the end of the day, everyone is looking for that Game of Thrones, that Die Hard, that whatever, pick the script. They're looking for that gold mine piece of property that's going to turn into Avatar and make $1 billion. So if you're lucky enough, you wrote it, or you might get hired to do a rewrite on it. I was always in the indie world, so I started passing my early scripts around to my indie producer friends. And any opportunity, I'm working crew and basically trying to pay the rent. But in between every job, I would write more scripts, write more short stories, and forget to feed the cat. And but always just trying to push ahead, and that led to many successes for me. So never made a living at writing, which was definitely became a goal of mine. But I'm really happy. I've got a pretty high hit rate. I've had, I think, 6 films made with my name on them, many more that I don't put my name on, that were either just rewrites or they're just kind of stuff that I don't really want my name on. And I also don't want to take attention away from the main writer. That's another Hollywood thing. When you see a script that goes around that's got 62 different writers on it, sometimes for good reasons, mostly for bad reasons, but you're getting into another person's work there. And I'm pretty sensitive about that, but it's also part of the whole Hollywood weird process of getting something to the finish line and getting it made. So I've long way to answer that question, but I got pretty damn good at the scripts, the format. I think it was the reading. I was also on the side doing what we call coverage and comment freelance. You get 30, 40, $50 each to read a script and summarize it and do the good points, because again, there's just the onslaught. You can't read it all. Yeah. So it made pretty good side money for years doing coverage and comment. And again, every single time I'm reading. At one point, I think I've read probably 1,000 or 2,000 scripts. And it can't, just like novels, the novel format gets into your head and you're absorbing, your brain and the subconscious is absorbing little pieces of other writers. The same thing with the screenwriters you see, and you start being a good analyst. This works, that doesn't work, this break isn't right. And again, some people make entire careers out of just being a script analyst on those things. So that's terrific. And having that eye to see good things, bad things. Same thing with music. Once you've listened to a million songs in the back of your head, you may not realize it, but what how a song works and how you can make it better. And when they should have done this at that point or something different. So yeah, that was what it was. And I got pretty good at it. And I used to get compliments that people liked reading my scripts because they read well. And that was because unlike a lot of screenwriters who I jokingly and with fondness say have never really written a message to their mother, they're writing a script. I'd been writing short stories since I was in the 6th grade. And I may not have the best grammar out there of everybody, but I've been writing and reading and creating things and stories. So I would put that into my scripts. My paragraphs are very visual and meant to be read. And again, different styles. Some people have very terse styles that get the point across. If you're familiar with plays have almost no exposition whatsoever in them. And one of the lessons that I always teach people is you can't overwrite scripts. Not only is there a very strict page count, but the reader, if you open up a script and there's a lot of dense text on the page and it looks like a novel, the reader's brains turn off. They don't want to see that. It needs to be more like a play, which is almost entirely dialogue. So back to Zelazny. You've got to put just enough description in to make it visual, make it read good, but you're not directing it. You're not creating it. You're creating a blueprint for them to turn into something. But at the same time, it's got to be read. It's got to be an enjoyable read to keep their attention. So got pretty good at that. But so had a few things made. Again, never quite crossed the mountain. Came really, really, really close 2 or 3 times with some very big projects that fell apart for various reasons. But I still go back and high five that 14-year-old kid, back in Indiana, looking at movie posters on the wall. Like, dude, you made Swamp Shark, you made Ice Spiders, you made horror movies, you did this, you worked on Legion with Dennis Quaid, Bones and all these things. It's but in some ways it's very, very satisfying to have had the experiences I've had.
Bones and All is a good movie. That I remember the year that came out, over on the Necromaniacs podcast. That was like, I think at least one of us 3 had that in our top 6 for the year. That was a good movie, I thought.
I still haven't watched it. It was a very difficult shoot for a lot of reasons, just the time and across multiple states, and there was a whole lot of elements going in that. And it was one of those shows where it became almost comical at a certain point, where anything that could go wrong will go wrong. And at one particular day, I was literally looking around going, am I in a reality show? Did I miss something in my deal memo that I'm actually being filmed? Because the things that were happening, this particular, for instance, we're moving from one location in Ohio to another one, and I'm racing ahead where the whole fleet and the whole team is coming, company move, we call it. And I'm running ahead with a location kid to make sure that everything's set in this small town. And the location kid calls, oh, hey, the mayor of the town called, and they forgot that they also have a biker convention in town today. And I just started laughing. I had just had to pull off the road because a tornado went by. I'm like, what's happening? The chaos of a regular set and moving 100 miles to the next set. And I'm coming into town like, you're joking, right? No, we just forgot. It's like, it's a small town. There's 2,000 people. How do you forget that a major motion picture and a biker convention are downtown on the same day? Like, maybe you need to use a different calendar system. But things like so, and then you get the call at the same time, hey, we're wrapped, we're heading your way. So you've got 20, 30 trucks, whatever, and the whole fleet, 200 people are coming here to shoot, and I'm the advance, like, okay, we had all the parking planned, we had everything ready, what am I going to do? And I pull into town, sure enough, there's 8,000 bikes. And I'm like, maybe when I was younger, I'd go up and start asking bikers to move their bikes out of the way, but I'm just not going to do that today. So you figure it out. And that's also kind of the fun and the madness of filmmaking, is that things just go wrong and you figure it out. How do we correct this and still give the director and the producer, give them what they want? And needless to say, we pulled off that whole show, and I hear it's a great film, and I will watch it someday. And I hear it's beautiful and shot at some incredible places and worked with some amazing talented people. Timothy Chalamet was amazing and really down to earth and humble guy. So it was cool to be able to interact with him and do things like that, and make apparently a beautiful movie about cannibals and love. There you go.
So where can people find you online? Like, what are the best places, like as far as social media and just presences on things like that?
I'm mostly on Instagram. Raging Eric with a C, and I'm on, I think it's the same one on Facebook. I'm not super active on Facebook, but so I'm not the biggest social media person ever, but I do I post about podcasts that I'm on and books, and also just observations on life, and always try to be entertaining and fun and weird. And my small press website is bigtimebooks.com, and my personal writing one is EricMiller Writes, EricMiller with a C. And you can search across Amazon and Goodreads and other places. I'm out there. IMDb, it comes up as the transportation one, but at some point you see all of the ridiculously varied amount of things that I've done, and the different worlds there, which are, when I look back at it, sometimes hard for me to believe I did all that. Oh, that's why I'm tired.
Well, Eric, thanks a lot for spending time with us this evening. And
great.
That was a great talk.
Yeah, I appreciate being on. I hope you and people found some new books and writers and things. And I've got a couple I got to look up now too. So spread the word, spread the word about art and music and all those good things, and just keep creating, everyone.
I've been taking notes in our conversation here. So yeah. Well, once again, thanks a lot.
Thanks. Appreciate you having me on.
You got it.